we are both new to entrepreneurship. And as we are, figuring out who our clients are, who our avatars are, how do we sell to them, how do we speak to them, I came across one client who was asking for something specific that was kind of tangential to what I do, but not exactly what I do. And I was thinking of other people who did the very thing that she asked for, as she was talking to me. And I was like, well, this is what I do. I don't exactly do that. And her response to me was, I want everything you got. Like I want it out. Like I want you to do the thing. And so for me, that became my single and sole client avatar.
That is the
I
avatar.
want the client that says, I want everything that you got.
We're gonna start this thing all right.
Hey, so welcome to Tip on Top of the Tip. I am Zenitra Perry.
And I am INEZ Chimangariso. Well, as we always do, we gonna start this thing all right with the value. Okay. So if you are familiar, every tip on top of the tip, we talk about a work value that is usually a personal value, and somehow it always ends up aligning with the tip. Z is going to select a random value, and we're going to talk about what it means to us.
So we threw it in our randomizer, and today's value of the day is fairness. Is fairness a value for you? What does that mean for you?
Fairness. I think fairness is a value for me, because fairness means everybody being treated equally to me. And that's a very high value for me. The interesting thing is last night I was watching The Equalizer 3 with my husband. And I feel like when I think about fairness, I think about that movie where, his main goal is to make sure that, good people are being treated fairly, right? Whether he got to take people out in order for them to get treated fairly, he gonna make sure they get treated fairly. And so for me, fairness is really like allowing the rules that are, instantiated to apply to everyone. But to me, it's also about like, specifically for work, I need to know and I want to be able to know that my performance, my pay, my promotions, even just my acceptance in my team and in the company is all rooted on something that is standard and foundational across every employee, right? And I think that's important in the workplace because it really creates a sense of like unity, right? And wellness. And then I think most importantly, like safety. Because if you don't feel like you are treated fairly or something may apply to you that doesn't apply to someone else, then you're going to be on guard, you're going to be defensive, all these things. The interesting thing is it makes me just think about living in the United States in general, as a Black woman and how, our ancestors and even, us today aren't always held to the same standards with the same level of fairness as other cultures. And so kind of in our culture, we get used to the lack of fairness. But I think even in being in a culture where, we may not be treated fairly, I still think it's important for us to treat others fairly. Right. And I try to do that, both in my personal life and my professional life.
Yeah, I agree. Fairness has always been something that's important to me. When I look at like the astrological signs, I'm a Libra, and we're always seeking balance. And then that balance is like justice and equity. And those are things that have always been a value of mine. I think some of that even ties back to being treated unfairly, at a young age, like even by adults, right? Like I have one particular teacher that comes in mind who didn't treat me fairly. It's so funny because she supports me so heavily on my social media now. But anyway, but like that really stands out to me. Like, when I was, a young girl and just being treated unfairly and always wanting everyone to be treated fairly. So that balance and justice is something that's always been just a part of my character. And then the experience of life and knowing what it feels like to not be treated fairly is something that like I always like to make sure that people are included. I love hosting things because my objective is to make sure that everyone feels included. So I'm going to be the person that's walking around and making sure that everyone feels like they belong in that space. And it shows up in my leadership style too, right? Like when I think about even some work situations where you can see people being treated unfairly, those things always stood out to me, and I wanted to make sure to create an environment where everyone felt like they had an equal shot, even if it's just their voice being heard, right? Like you've been in those meetings where you hear people, you'll hear one person say something and the room doesn't respond well to it, but
Right.
another person can say the very exact same thing and everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. And I'm like, okay,
Right.
like we're
I
not going to do
know.
that. Like, can we bring it back to, the first person? Like, that's exactly what they said. And so I'm always going to be that voice in the room that's trying to create the fairness. Like, I see it when it's not there. And I will
Mhm.
be extremely vocal about, like, trying to level the playing field so that everyone can kind of bring the best versions of themselves. But I love that you talked about getting used to not being treated fairly, or having that as a norm, and how people kind of lean into that, and they may not be as vocal, because that's, for me, it's just something that I won't stand for, but I end up being the only person in the room sometimes that's willing to be like, no, this isn't right, like let's figure out how to make this fair. And
Mhm.
it really shapes my worldview, right? Like I believe in not only fairness but truth, and I personally believe that people tell me their truth. At least that's been my experience, and maybe it's because
Mhm.
I come from a place of honesty, that good, bad, or indifferent, people tend to tell me their truth, and that's something that I can deal with, and figure out how to create fairness within that space. But if there's any type of deception, then like there's always going to be unfairness. So fairness for me
Mhm.
isn't just about what actually happens, but you have to have truth that's tied to it so that it can truly be fair, right? Because sometimes people present things as if they are fair when they're really not, but you can't tell because they're not being honest. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
so, yeah.
Well, and I think about, as you were talking, I started thinking about what I do for is deeper than travel. And, when I first started my travel journeys in the diaspora, I learned so much about how Black and Brown people everywhere share very similar stories, experiences, and the like. But I also learned that we have a lot of stereotypes about each other, right? That keep us from connecting, and from learning more. And, I think when I think about fairness, one of the things that I try to do in those spaces is to help people to come in from a perspective of curiosity as opposed to judgment. And I think that's important in the workplace and in life when it comes to fairness, right? Like, because a lot of times we have a lot of preconceived notions that we'll bring to the table, and usually you will end up treating people unfairly because of those preconceived notions, or because or you tried to, as they say, judge a book by its cover,
Hmm.
right? And you don't give people the opportunity to show you who they are, right? And to present to you a new idea about that demographic that you may have certain ideas or biases about. Um, and I think bringing a level of curiosity is what can create the fairness in all these spaces, because you're able to ask questions, right? And be open to answers, and be open to being wrong about somebody, or being wrong about a specific demographic, or being, wrong about whatever you thought. And then allowing people to be their whole self, right? And allowing them to thrive in these environments, even if their whole self doesn't line up with you, right? Or what you believe is true. Similar to you, I'm the person who is definitely going to be in the room trying to bring people together, because I think, I always say this about travel specifically, but I think it's, true about people too. Like, we are different like each other as opposed to different from each other. And so there's always these differences, but especially like in a work environment, the differences are what make it good. Like it's what makes us be able to solve problems well. So when you get into a space where you are not being fair and not allowing people to have the same standards for which they are, assessed and reviewed and, heard in meetings and all of these things, then you lose some of that collaboration and some of the creativity that can come from that, it makes, and one of the things I was thinking about with regard to, being someone who does value fairness, I think that it creates that in those spaces. But what I realize is that for it only creates that for people who value fairness.
Mm.
Right? So if you don't value fairness and you want to be treated differently, right? Or you want to be the exception, or you want, as we would say, the hookup, or like you want to get a pass, then for you, fairness is a problem, right? Because it it doesn't allow you to be the one to be the exception, right? And some people actually live their careers on trying to be the exception,
Mm.
right? Trying to, not necessarily have to go through the same steps and go through the same hoops and, do the same things everybody else, because they want to be able to skip over it. And that is the opposite of, I think, somebody who values fairness, right? So I was just thinking about how, the idea that the unity and the safety and the wellness of having fairness in your workspace creates that in that community, but it's only true for people who actually value fairness.
That goes, I love it, goes back to the self-awareness. We always talk about just understanding who you are,
Mm-hmm.
what motivates you. When you were talking about travel, it reminded me of the trip that we took to Brazil, and a big self-awareness that I came to realize, and it's not just about myself, Zenitra, but myself as a Black American, or even as an American being outside of the United States. Our tour guide said that, Americans tend to think that we are the center of the universe. And so when we were talking to her about a specific doll that was a representation of a Black person, a Black child, it was something that we were offended by. And we assumed that, like, why aren't you offended by this?
Mm-hmm.
And she spoke to how we were taught to not love this version of ourselves, and how she loved it and would even buy it for her daughter as a
Mm-hmm.
Black woman. And but the idea that we felt like everyone should be offended by this doll, she was calling out the Americanness and feeling like our perspective is the center of the world and it should be the sole perspective. And that just opened up my mind to being like, wow, like, what are some things that I think, or some ways that I view things that may not be the universal truth, the universal law?
Mm-hmm.
And that got me to that place of curiosity that you mentioned, and that really did spawn from a travel trip, but then also just an interest in myself and understanding, like, how I view things. And so I'm able to then bring that into workspaces and question without judgment, like, where did this perspective come from? Why do we believe these things to be true? And then how do we make sure that it can either be, even if it's not a universal truth, but we're honest about what those perceptions are, so that we can then move from a place of
Yep.
fairness. Because
Yep.
if you don't kind of question the thoughts behind, those actions that are being taught, you can very well intend to be fair and be pushing a single narrative. And we want
Right.
that's not something that we're doing, as we think about collaborating and working with different people. So yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
curiosity is a big one, big one.
Yes. Yes. So you want to jump into the tip?
Let's jump into this tip. First tip of
Yeah. The
2024.
first tip of 2024 came right out of 2023.
So the tip is, I want everything that you got.
Everything. Okay.
Everything.
Everything. Now, see, you can tell the background of this one.
So this came from, we are both new to entrepreneurship. And as we are, figuring out who our clients are, who our avatars are, how do we sell to them? How do we speak to them? I came across one client who was asking for something specific that was kind of tangential to what I do, but not exactly what I do. And I was thinking of other people who did the very thing that she asked for, as she was talking to me. And I was like, well, this is what I do. I don't exactly do that. And her response to me was, I want everything you got. Like, I want it out. Like, I want you to do the thing. And so for me, that became my single and sole client avatar.
That is the
I
avatar.
want the client that says, I want everything that you got, because it speaks to a level of trust, their ability to see what you're capable of doing, even if you can't see it for yourself in all instances. But we think about sales pitches and like what's the right words to use and how do we get a person to say yes to a sell, and what questions do we need to ask them. But sometimes it's as simple as finding the audience that truly believes in you and they want everything that you have. And that comes from an entrepreneur perspective in this specific scenario. But when you're interviewing for jobs, when you're looking for teams that you want to be on, when you're looking for team members, are you willing to say, I want everything you got? Or are you saying yes
Mm-hmm.
to the companies and the teams that say, I want everything that you got? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so that 2023 taught us, we got to find the clients who want everything you got.
Yes. Yes. It's so funny because as I think about this, um, the level of like celebrating all of who you are that comes along with I want everything you got. Like, I've heard people say like don't go where you're tolerated, go where you're celebrated, right? Because those are the rooms that, they are going to be excited about everything about you. It's funny because I think about um that is the energy I want to bring to every scenario. Like one of the reasons why I married my husband is because he was like, I want everything you got. Okay. Like, right. Even now, as I consider, um, clients, right, who especially in this, I feel like we're in a very much like an identity market where people don't care what you're selling if they like who you are, right? That's why celebrities can sell you anything. I was like, honey, Snoop Dogg agent is on point because Snoop Dogg is selling everything. Okay, he went from the chronic all way, all way. He's like with Martha Stewart, and people are like, I want everything you got, Snoop, because they like him, right? They like who he is, they like his persona, that everything about him. And so I think that is the world that we're in today. Like if you build a know, like, and trust based on who you authentically are, and allowing that to be the highlights and the lowlights, right? And allowing people to experience those things and share those things, and people can see the full version of you, then they can get to the point of being like, oh yeah, I want everything you got. Like, because I can relate to you, and I can see where you're going, I can see where you've been, and I'm trying to go there too. Even as I consider, taking employment or even consulting jobs, like I have gotten to a place in my career, like, you have got to want everything I got. Like, I cannot hide portions of me. I cannot be like, well, I'm not going to tell them about this. Or I don't. No, I need all of the things. And I need you to be like, yep, we'll take all of that. And it's a requirement because that's the state of being that I'm in my life. Right. And so I think, as you are considering relationships, right, if you're considering friendships, honey, I know all my friends are, I want everything you got, honey. Let me tell you, ain't no hiding, ain't no all the good, the bad, the aggravating, the loud laughing, everything. Okay. Y'all don't know, back in the day, I used to really laugh super loud and like literally like just a booming laughter. And Z would literally have to cover my mouth because I'd be so loud in every space. But it was like, okay, like I know you loud, but okay, we still fabulous best friends because I want everything you got.
Right.
So like consider this in every area of your life because it's gonna be important for you to be in the places where you are celebrated and not tolerated.
Yes, I love that. It's so funny because I feel like we recently came to that realization of I want everything you got, as it relates to our friendship, and the things that may have annoyed us about one another at even very young ages. And it came to our awareness because Inez was with her mini me, her oldest daughter. And she was like, girl, she is a lot. And I don't know how you dealt with me because she is me. And I was
Right.
like, I was actually just thinking the same thing. And that brought us to this space of like, oh no, like I was like, apparently I still allowed you to be who you are, even with me covering your mouth because you were just too doggone loud.
Yes.
I still allowed you to be enough of who you are where you felt like this was a good space to come. And you still came with your loud laugh. And I just put a little
Mm-hmm.
hand over the
Yes.
mouth when you got a little too loud. And that was fine. But it's crazy how people are who they are, from a very young age. Because we're talking,
Yes.
at 9 and 10-year olds doing this. So that was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think about I want everything you have, and you always say this, and it's crazy how it continues to happen, it does tie back to the work value, which is fairness, right?
Yep.
It's like if you are going to be fair, being fair looks like welcoming people with all that they have. You
Mm-hmm.
can't only welcome certain parts of people because then you'll be more critical whenever they aren't able to deliver on whatever that one thing that you only wanted them for. And that's what I love about I want everything you got, because there's grace in that, right? Like you're not even expecting me to be perfect, you're expecting me to be me, and that'll
Mm-hmm.
allow me space to evolve, space to even make mistakes. But you've bought into the totality of me, and you see the value in all of me, not only in one specific service that I offer, that I claim to have expertise in. Because even though I have expertise in this area, like we don't live in silos, so we can't work in silos. So you may,
Mm-hmm.
hire me to do one particular thing, but I'm probably going to have to do some other things as well, in order to fulfill that task or whatever. And so but I need for there to be some grace, because when you operate in spaces where there is no grace, then that's how you end up increasing your imposter syndrome, because you
Mm-hmm.
then begin to feel that you're not enough. You then begin to feel that you have to be perfect in every single area. And maybe you're not worthy of the space that you're in because you're only perfect in 2 areas and not 10. But so this
Mm-hmm.
idea of fairness, this idea of I want everything you have, really is to allow people to bring their whole self, their authentic self, so that we aren't fueling this freaking imposter syndrome and self-sabotage, because those things don't happen only in your head, right? It's generally because you encountered something that made you believe that you're not enough, right? You don't just
Mm-hmm.
into this world be like, I'm not enough for anything, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we have to be mindful of how we are impacting other people's lives, how we're impacting the thoughts that they have about themselves. And if we are more welcoming, if we are treating them fairly, if we're allowing them to be all of themselves, of course, within bounds, you might have to put a little hand over the mouth every now and again. But still be welcoming of the person in totality, so that we are all kind of living in that I don't want to say utopia, but operating as efficiently as we possibly can and delivering the best results, because we're allowing people to bring all of their experience, their skills, their knowledge, their expertise, even their flaws, right? I
Mm-hmm.
always even say when I'm building a team, I like to make sure that there are people who have strengths in the areas that I'm weak. And I celebrate them for those things, because guess what? I don't even want to deal with the things and where I'm
Mm-hmm.
not strong. I want to, double down on my strengths. So being honest and open about what some of my weaknesses are will allow other people to step up, and it doesn't mean that because it's an area that I'm weak in, that I don't focus on it, that it's not important. I don't want to only think about the things where I'm strong, but I want to create a space of balance and fairness by allowing people to kind of counter
Mm-hmm.
my strengths with theirs, so that we can be as efficient as possible.
Mm-hmm. When I was thinking about you talking about people being bought in, right? Like I feel like when somebody is in a space of like, I want everything you got, they are completely bought in, and vice versa for you. Like you can tell when you're completely bought in, and it really is a feeling that you can feel, right? And I think a lot of times we, especially women, sometimes we get caught up in trying to get people to buy in,
Mhm.
right? And it's one of the things that I am trying to train and teach my daughter in early, right? Because as I see her as my mini me, I can see, to your point, how much of the way I am is very innate because it's just in her already. She's only 4. Um, and I want her to, like, for instance, I remember we went to the playground the other day, and we live in a neighborhood where it's not a lot of us sometimes. And so her personality is very much come one, come all, just like mine, right? And, that aligns very much with fairness too. Like, it don't matter who you are, you are welcome here until you show me differently, right? That's the only thing. And so she is that way on the playground. And of course, all kids aren't that way, right? And so sometimes when she's playing with kids, I can tell that they are kind of giving her mean girl energy, but she is very much come one, come all. So she's like, and she doesn't know the difference, but I know that she can feel the difference, right? And so she was playing with these two girls, and they were a little older than her, and like I felt like they were playing tag, but I felt like she was always it, right? So she always had to chase them around. So I was like, I ain't gonna jump in, I'm just gonna observe. And then another little girl came, and she was very much in the I want everything you got energy with True. Like, she was playing with her, jumping around, they were chasing, they were talking, all the things. So when we got in the car, I said, True, when you are playing with kids, you want to pay attention to what it feels like. Does it feel to her fun? Right? Are you feeling like it's a lot of fun? Right? If you're not feeling like the way you felt with Logan, where it felt fun, it felt exciting, it felt like she was playing with you and you were playing with her, then you don't have to play with them. Like, that's how those are the kids that you may not want to play with. You may not want to be around. You want to be around the ones that make you feel excited and fun and happy, right? And she said, what, Mama? She was like, yeah, I did have a lot of fun with Logan. She was like, and she was like, I played with the other girls, and I can play with them even if they don't feel as fun, but I did have a lot of fun with Logan. So I'm like, even if you want to play with them, I still want you to be very clear on that feeling early in your life so that you can sense when people aren't giving you the I want everything you got energy, so that you can recognize it and you can stand boldly in it as you get older. So I think it's very important to pay attention to the sense and the intuition that we have about the spaces that we enter, the relationships that we enter, even the workplaces that we enter, when we are showing up authentically and as our whole self, because your brain will sometimes try to talk you into thinking that everything is okay, but your body knows that it's not, right?
Thinking about your feelings as an adult, teaching her to do it as a child is so excellent, because many of us have lost it as adults, probably because it was suppressed for whatever reason.
Yes.
But I saw a post that said going back to work after a break involves a few days of waiting to get back into the swing of things. Then eventually you remember you were never in the swing of things even before the break. There is no swing of things. The things remain unswinged.
Oh, honey.
And if that's how you're feeling when you're entering into these spaces, when you're entering back, going back to work, when you're going to the playground to get on the literal swing, like, pay attention to how you're feeling. Is this a space that says I want everything you got? Is this a space that feels fair, or are you literally unswung?
Right.
And if you're unswung, what are the steps that you're going to take to remove yourself from that situation? And we want to make sure that you know that the next space that you enter into needs to be one that says, I want everything you got.
Yes, absolutely. Y'all, please, as you enter into 2024 this year, we want the spaces, the places, the people, the workplaces that want everything we got. Like, because sometimes we will choose comfort over the actual feeling of I want everything you got. And it's hard because comfort is comfortable, child. Like, it's predictable and it feels very safe externally, but usually internally, you can feel that there's a sense of a lack of safety somewhere. So yes.
So please comment. Let us know, who are the people, places, and things that made you feel like I want everything you got. Is it a friend? Is it a coworker? Is it someone that you've inclined as a client? And what did they say to you to let you know that they wanted everything that you got? Leave us some comments, and we will see you back here